Hi everyone, welcome back to Alice and the Giant Bookshelf. Today's video is my vlog all about judging the Booktube Octofinals. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you are new. My name's Alice and I have way too many books, and this year once again I decided I would like to put my name forward to judge the Booktube Prize. And the Booktube Prize, in case you haven't heard about it before, is a prize hosted here on YouTube by the Booktube Prize channel, which is run by Robert over at Barter Hordes. The idea of this prize is that the winner is basically selected by booktubers and booktube viewers and anyone in the community who puts their name forward to get involved. It's currently February, and this week the Octofinals book list was announced. So in January, everyone who was participating receives a long list of all of the fiction books that can be voted for this year. And I think there were over 100 different nominations. From this list, if you are judging, you are allowed to select 20 nominations to go through to the first round. And once you've submitted your 20, the votes go into the computer, which draws the books that get the most votes into 8 groups of 6 books. So 48 books go through for fiction and 48 for non-fiction. This first round, because there are 8 groups, is called the Octofinals. So I have been selected to judge a group in the Octofinals, and this year that is Fiction Group H. Throughout the months of February and March, I will be reading these 6 books and I will be ranking them in the order in which I enjoy them. And at the end of the round, it will be announced which books have progressed from this round of 48 to the next round, which will be the quarterfinals. In each successive round, the field is cut in half until we reach the finals, where there will be just one group of 6 books left. And a winner will be announced in, I think, maybe October, November time. I can't quite remember, but I'll put it on screen. In my group this year, I have got the following books: Now Is Not the Time to Panic by Kevin Wilson, Carrie, Soto is Back by Jenkins Reid, Bliss Montage by Ling, which is a collection of short stories, I believe, Glory by NoViolet Bulawayo, All This Could Be Different by Thankam Mathews, and Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle, Zevin. So I will be reading those 6 books over the months of February and March, and I will be letting you know in this vlog as I go along how I'm getting on with my judging. I didn't really know an awful lot about any of the books. I mean, I've picked up Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow in a bookshop before, nearly bought it in between Christmas and New Year. And it's a book that I've certainly heard a lot about. It's had a lot of hype. I've also heard quite a lot of hype for Carrie, Soto is Back. And I have previously read a Jenkins Reid book, which was 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I know that Bliss Montage is a book of short stories. I know that Glory was shortlisted for last year's Booker Prize, and I actually attempted to read it back then and DNF'd it. So I will be going back to that book because we are not actually allowed to DNF the books in our group. We need to read them. So yeah, we'll see how I get on with my second try at Glory. I have so far managed to get hold of a couple of the books, so I had a little bit of trouble because 2 of the books, Bliss Montage and Now Is Not the Time to Panic, are not available as audiobooks at the moment in the UK. I've actually asked my library to purchase these books because my library doesn't have any copies either, and they have agreed to buy these, so I'm just hoping against hope that these are going to come in by March so that I can get them read by the end of March. 2 others, Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow and All This Could Be Different, are available in the library system of my county, but they are out on loan at the moment, so I have reserved both of these titles. I'm hoping again that they come in before March so that I can read them. The 2 books I did have ready access to, one was in my local library, Carrie, Soto is Back, and one was in my mum's local library, Glory, so I was able to get hold of these straight away. So it's currently Saturday the 4th of February, and I have actually just finished my first book. I went and got Carrie, Soto is Back out on the 2nd. Believe me, I was not convinced that this was a book that I would like at all, because I opened it and it was immediately incredibly about tennis. So much tennis in this book. I'm not a huge fan of tennis. I do sort of know the basic rules, and the basic rules of tennis are explained to you in the beginning of Carrie Soto as well, through Carrie having the rules explained to her by her father as a child. I did not have high hopes, basically. By the time I was sort of halfway-ish through this, I was enjoying it a bit more. There's really two parts to this story. So it's mainly a story about Carrie Soto, who is a 37-year-old former tennis player who decides to go back to play tennis again one last time to compete in the 4 Grand Slams that year, which happens to be 1995. And she wants to do this because someone has just drawn level with her record of number of Grand Slams won, and she was previously the best. So Carrie's now 37 and about to make a comeback, hopefully. I really did quite enjoy Carrie's present day story. Found her past storyline of all her sort of growing up, learning to play tennis, all her past glory, a little bit dry because I'm not a huge fan of tennis, as I say. Carrie is deliberately portrayed as a bit unlikable. She sort of keeps herself to herself in the world of tennis, and she's thought to be a bit of a standoffish, not very nice person. Her nickname is the Battle Axe. People don't really like her. So we're sort of encouraged to not really like Carrie as well. I think we're supposed to feel for her a bit, but she definitely had a big character arc in this book. And by midway through this, I couldn't help but root for Carrie. By the time it was into her comeback, I was more interested. Unfortunately, her comeback does feature quite a few matches which we sort of get a bit of a blow by blow of, and about midway through this, at the beginning of today, I sort of predicted to my husband what was going to happen in this, and I am pleasantly surprised to say that now I've finished it this evening, I was actually partly wrong, and that's really good because I thought this was going to be so predictable and it actually wasn't. So I'm really glad that some of the predictions that I made were wrong, and I actually think that this is a good book, even though I'm not really that into tennis, and I think people who are into tennis will absolutely love this book. I thought it was well done. I enjoyed some of the sort of 90s references, and I really did like the ending, so a lot better than I was expecting, which is really, really refreshing. So yeah, onwards and upwards. Let's hope the other 5 books are just as good or better. Okay, this is my update of how I'm getting on with the Booktube Prize reading, and I've read one more book, which is Glory by NoViolet Bulawayo. I finished this last week, finally. The main thing that reading this taught me was that I need to respect my own convictions when I DNF something. I DNF'd Glory last year, and it's definitely a book that I would DNF again if I had the chance to. Unfortunately, for the Booktube Prize, we are not allowed to DNF books because we need to give them all a fair judgment by reading the whole thing. And I pretty much hated every moment of reading this. This is just my opinion. I mean, obviously this is a good book. It got onto the shortlist for the Booker Prize, and many people, I'm sure, have absolutely loved this book. But Glory is just not for me at all. So initially I thought I might try and listen to it on audiobook again, but I still had the same problem with the audiobook that I was having last year, which is that I think the narrator is really well matched to the story, but I just felt like the audiobook was shouting at me the whole time. It's very shouty. So I just did not want to listen to that, and I couldn't take it in properly, so I got a copy out of the library. I tried with the physical copy, and I have finished the book now, and there were 2 parts in this, not even full chapters, that I thought were really well written, really powerful and moving stuff. But that's just 2 tiny bits of this book. Do I think it was worth reading the whole book to read those 2 bits? No. Will those 2 bits stay with me? Perhaps. But I really Glory is so not a book for me, and it was partly, I think, the writing style, which I think a lot of people will find interesting and enjoy, but I didn't. And it's partly that it's an entirely political story, and I'm not very interested in politics, and I feel like this is a book that is important rather than enjoyable to read. So I'm sort of glad I've read it, because it does deal with some really important topics, but I just didn't really enjoy the way it did deal with them. For me, it wasn't something I could particularly connect to. I liked the character of Destiny, the goat, and her parts of this book were a lot more enjoyable for me than parts that were about the different horses and so on. I also did really enjoy one of the sections that was about one of the guards and how he came to be a guard. One of the things that most annoyed me about this book was, and I can sort of see why Bulawayo does this, but in places there are pages that are just entirely the same, not even sentence, part of a sentence over and over again. So this one, for example, is the phrase talks to the dead and talks to the dead and talks to the dead and talks to the dead for the whole page. And there was another example where it was and takes and takes and takes and takes and takes and takes. And I just think it's, to me, it's lazy writing, it's bad editing. I just don't want to read a whole page of the same words. And I get that the author is probably trying to drive a point home and really emphasize it. I didn't need that amount of emphasis, and I actually thought it weakened the writing personally for me. Those pages particularly irritated me. I mean, it's a 400-page book, so I just feel things like that could have been cut down, and I just feel like this book could have been a lot shorter and been a lot more impactful. The parts that were really impactful for me were so impactful, and there was a part where I was moved. It wasn't enough to elevate this book for me to anything beyond the last spot in this group. I mean, the last 4 books that I've got to read would have to be really bad, or I would have to really not connect with them for them to come lower in the group than Glory. I do feel like this is a love or hate book. The other thing I really disliked about it was the characterization of the animals. Part of me understands why this has had comparisons to Animal Farm, because characters in it are presented as animals, but another part of me says I just really didn't get on with how the animals were written. Like, these are animals that are going on Twitter and social media and have phones, and it just didn't work for me. It shouldn't be compared to Animal Farm. For me, if I'm judging 6 books and I've got to judge which one I enjoyed the most, that is what it's about for me. I didn't enjoy the experience of reading Glory at all. It was really hard work. So I wouldn't personally recommend this to anybody with similar taste to me. So if you did like Glory, that's absolutely fine. I think that every book has its person who it is for, and Glory is not for me, and I do wish that I could have DNF'd it. Yes, onwards and upwards. My next book is going to be Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin, because my library have managed to get this in for me. It is now Monday the 27th of February, and I have finished my 3rd book for the Octofinals, which was Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. And just, wow, I am really impressed with this book. I really understand what the hype has been all about. I feel that this is the book in my group that has really had a huge amount of build up and hype, and people saying that they really have enjoyed it. I love this book. It's probably my favourite book I've read so far this year. First book I've really wanted to give 5 stars to, and that is in spite of the fact that there were definitely things that I didn't like in Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. And one of those things that I didn't like was there was the occasional turn of phrase in this that I found a little bit jarring, and I don't really know what the right word to use is, but definitely there was here and there some turns of phrase that I didn't enjoy and that I thought were a bit not quite a tone that I particularly enjoy. But around that there was just this brilliant storyline that I loved, and the main thing that tips this over into a 5-star for me is the feelings that this book gave me, and there were a lot of them. There were at least 2 episodes of crying, a lot of crying, ugly crying, and it doesn't take much for a book to make me cry, but it does take a lot for a book to make me actually sob, and Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow does this. Did I always like the characters? No. Are the characters really, really frustrating at times and you just want to shout at them to stop being horrible to each other? Yes, but so many feelings, so many feelings. I loved the use of Shakespeare in this. The title, Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, is a quote from Macbeth. I loved the way Macbeth was important to this book, the way Shakespeare was important to this book in general, and I loved all of the video game stuff. People who don't think they like books that are about video games, this isn't a book about video games, but it is a book about 3 people who do make a video game together and what happens to them after that. And there is therefore a lot of mention of the video games industry, of sort of games from the 80s, 90s, 2000s, and I really, really enjoyed that. I'm not massively a gamer myself, and that is because I'm really, really bad at computer games. I just can't seem to complete them, or levels, or that sort of thing. I have always been quite interested in games ever since my brother got an original PlayStation back in the day, and my husband is much more into computer games than I am, and I was really, really pleased that some of his favourites were mentioned in here. And you can tell that Zevin is very knowledgeable about computer games. In her acknowledgements, she mentions that both of her parents were in video game design, I believe, or in that industry somehow when she was growing up. So it's obviously something that has meant a lot to her. She's written what I would consider, for the most part, a really brilliant book, mainly about friendship, and it's a really frustrating friendship. But I would also say that this is a book about love, and not just friendship love. There is other love in this, but the kind of love that is in here is that sort of love between friends that kind of become your family. No matter how horrible and frustrating Sadie and Sam are at times, I just wanted to follow their lives, and we follow their lives for a good chunk of time in this book, and I was left at the end thinking, I want to know what happens to Sam and Sadie next. And for me, that's the mark of a good book, the mark that I'm going to be thinking about this for some time to come. I am a little bit worried that this book might lead to a book hangover, because I've already significantly slowed down reading since finishing this yesterday morning. I haven't really wanted to read my other books because this was just so devastating to me, and I really, really enjoyed it. I couldn't put this down. It's quite heavy, 400 pages. There's a lot going on, but I couldn't stop reading it. I lost sleep over this book. One main thing that I would say was a thing that I found absolutely cringeworthy in terms of turns of phrase is that at one point, luckily it only happened once, there is a scene where the main character Sam, a part of his body, shall we say, is described in just such a weird way that I just couldn't understand why the author had chosen to do that. But that is my biggest complaint with Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. If I reread this, which I happily would, I think I would probably skip that sentence because it just weirded me out. It was really strange. But yes, loads of other stuff I loved in this book, but I don't want to ramble on about it forever. I thought that the storyline with Sam and Sadie meeting in a hospital, and Sam's trauma that comes into the book again and again, his pain that he is in from a car accident that he has had both emotionally and physically, is re-explored throughout this book, and that element of it was really, really important to me. And I really enjoyed the way the characters incorporated aspects of their lives into their video games. It was very much to me like reading about author protagonists, which I always love, because they were writing these games and they were using their own experiences in that. I would say that this is a book best gone into not knowing too much about the storyline itself. Just go with it. I do recommend Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. I don't think it will be a book that everyone likes, and if you find it difficult to gel with the writing style, I would say give it a little bit of time. But if you get several chapters in and you still don't think that the writing style is for you, maybe this isn't a book for you. But it was a book for me. I'm really happy that I read this as part of the Booktube Prize. I'm glad that for me it kind of did live up to the hype. A really, really good book. So let's hope the next one is good. None of the rest are available in my library yet, but I am hoping that the next one to come in will be All This Could Be Different by Sarah Thankam Mathews, because I have seen that that is now on its way to my library. Right, it is the 14th of March and I have quite a big update because I have finished 2 more books for the Booktube Prize, and I also have started the last book in the group. The next book I finished was All This Could Be Different by Sarah Thankam Mathews, and this was a bit of a book of 2 halves for me. I really did find this one a slog to get into, and it's quite likely that if I had had a choice in the matter, I might have DNF'd this early doors or almost about halfway through. The main reason for this is that I didn't particularly feel for the character very much, the main character, whose name is Sneha. Her life was moderately interesting, but I just didn't find her to be that compelling a character. I found a lot of the things that were going on in the book to just not really interest me, and I found it particularly uncomfortable. There were a couple of really very, very spicy bits which I just didn't need at all. I know particularly disliked the wording of these parts, but that may just be me. Coming into the second half of the book, Sneha does take a trip back to India where her parents live. Big backstory with her dad and what happened with him in America and the reason why they are no longer in America. I found this a lot more interesting, and from there on the book sort of really perked up for me. The thing I liked probably most about this book was some of the side characters. So I really liked Sneha's friend Tig. Tig was a super interesting character, lots of layers going on. They had really big dreams. I just felt like Tig was a character who I could really picture, and they were like a very sort of larger than life, really, really interesting character to me. I also found Sneha's friend Tom really interesting, and some of the storylines with him were great, but throughout the book I didn't really connect with the main character Sneha, and I also really didn't like her love interest much at all. She obviously does like her love interest a lot. I didn't, and yeah, I just thought Marina was not a very pleasant character in my opinion. I personally wasn't rooting for the 2 of them as a couple. And the final part of this book does take place a bit later than the rest of the book, and the whole book is kind of written as though the main character is looking back on all of these events from a few years into the future, and this book was fine for the most part. Some very uncomfortable reading in it for me, but overall, certainly in the second half, an interesting enough story. I do think there are a lot of people who will enjoy this one a lot more than I did. It's just not particularly these sort of insular narratives of one person in sort of pretty mundane life. I'm not that compelled by them, even though there were quite a lot of interesting people in this character's life. She herself was not super interesting to me, although some of her background was. So yeah, mixed bag. This one's kind of middle of the road for me. I don't think a book could really top the group for me when I spent half of the book not really wanting to read it. I will be really interested to hear other people's reviews of this book. I would say that this is likely to end up in 3rd or 4th place in this group, depending on the final 2 books that I read. I probably did enjoy Carrie Soto is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid marginally more, but again, both of those for me, I didn't love the main character. I don't know, I just think this one had a little bit about it that would maybe put it above that for me. So at the moment it's above that. It's obviously above Glory. It doesn't come anywhere near to how much I loved Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. I'm so thrilled with my library. I've actually managed to get all 6 books from the library. As I said at the beginning, I was able to get 2 of them off the shelves. I was able to reserve 2 more, and I was able to request the library to buy 2 more, which I really thought was very touch and go as to whether they'd be here by the end of March. They both arrived towards the beginning of March, and here they are. The next one I read was the only short story collection in the group, Bliss Montage Stories by Ling, the author of Severance. I haven't read Severance, but yeah, Bliss Montage was really interesting. And this book for me brought up the question, how do you really compare a book of short stories to novels? And I think that is going to be really difficult. I think in the groups where the judges have got to judge short stories is so subjective, because a lot of people don't really enjoy short stories. I do enjoy short stories, but I'm not sure that they should be up against novels, because I'm not sure how they're going to fare. I'll be interested to see how many of the short story collections do actually go through. This one is very short, and it had only 8 short stories. I had mixed feelings about pretty much all of the short stories. There maybe wasn't really that much of a standout one. Probably the one I enjoyed most was called G. I thought this was a really good short story. All of the elements of this really worked for me. Really hard, obviously, to summarise short stories without spoiling them. This is a short story about a drug called G, which enables you to be invisible. Really interesting short story. I would recommend that most out of the collection, and actually that's probably the one I'll think about again the most. The second one that I enjoyed quite a bit was the shortest story in the collection, which was called Yeti Lovemaking. Really weird. Like these short stories are weird, and I like weird. This one was maybe a little bit too weird for my taste, and I didn't really fully understand the ending. But I did really like what the author was doing in this story about Yeti lovemaking. Very strange concept for a short story, but it actually worked for me. I would have to say the first one, called Los Angeles, I didn't really get it. This is a story about a woman who lives with her husband and her children and all of her 100 ex-boyfriends. Weird, but I thought the premise and the opening to how she introduces things that go on with her and her ex-boyfriends was really interesting. There were some stylistic choices that I thought were interesting in Los Angeles. The second short story, Oranges, has quite a big overlap with the first short story, Los Angeles, in that it has a character in common. So one of the ex-boyfriends features basically, but different main character. And this was a bit of a strange story, sort of about stalking. I didn't say that I fully think that this was a great short story. It was a good one, but I just didn't think there was enough there to really flesh it out, but I did think it was interesting. The longest short story in the collection is called Returning, and this was a really interesting short story too, about a woman and her husband, and they're both authors. I thought the stuff about their books and how that tied into the actual storyline of this short story was really interesting and well done. But again, I was left at the end thinking, I'm not sure I really fully get this. So if anybody has read this short story collection, please do let me know, and please do let me know if I've missed the point of some of these. Office Hours is another really good story in here, really bizarre, but basically about a student and her professor. There were again elements I didn't really fully understand in this one. The next story, Peking Duck, I thought was really interesting, and it's kind of got a stories within stories in this one, and I think this is a theme in this collection, and I thought that the storytelling idea and the way it was done in this one was really good. There's a mother-daughter relationship in this one that I really liked. The final short story, Tomorrow, I just found really a bit disturbing. This is about a pregnant lady, and I don't want to say anything to spoil it, but I did find it disturbing, and I definitely wouldn't read that story again. And I didn't understand the ending, which was a shame because this was the last story in the book. So it's left me with that feeling of not really understanding. However, my overwhelming feeling while reading this was one of interest and enjoyment, even where I didn't fully understand the short stories. And I think sometimes there isn't enough time to fully get something across in the space of a short story. So I kind of get that. I did like reading this, and I read it very quickly. So yeah, the real difficulty comes in comparing this to novels because it's very different. I definitely want to seek out Ling Ma's other work because I really enjoyed her writing style and thought it was super interesting, and I thought there was some great ideas in this and some fantastic storytelling. So for me, this one is definitely going to end up high up in the group. I would certainly place it above books where I didn't enjoy them for the full amount of the time. There was no parts of this book where I was bored. There wasn't time to get bored because they were short stories, and they all had like really little intriguing sidelines and hooks and layers. So I do recommend this to people, probably people who've read Ling Ma before, or people who really enjoy short stories, or if you just like weird stuff. This is weird, but I am here for it. So I don't think that other people are necessarily going to vote this book through to the next round, but it gets my vote. It was an enjoyable read for me. So that is that one. The final book I've got left to read in the group is Now Is Not the Time to Panic by Kevin Wilson. I will update you when I have finished this one. Today is the 25th of March, and I am here to chat to you about my final book for the Booktube Prize this year for the Octofinals, and that was Now Is Not the Time to Panic by Kevin Wilson. I actually finished this over a week ago now. I really enjoyed this book, and it was probably my second favourite book of the round. I still gave this one 5 stars. Where Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow is an incredibly popular book, and I think loads of people will like it. I probably would recommend it to most people. I think Now Is Not the Time to Panic is a much quieter book, and a book that I think will only be to some people's tastes. I wouldn't recommend this book to everybody, but I would recommend it to some people. Now Is Not the Time to Panic is like a coming of age story about Frankie Budge and a new friend that she makes called Zeke, and what they do one summer. Frankie is now an adult, and she's looking back on that time in her life, and there is a reason for that, but I won't give any spoilers. Basically, Frankie and Zeke make a poster together. Zeke is a bit of an artist, Frankie's a writer. They make a poster that says a particular phrase on it, and they start putting it up around their small town. And this is a book about what happens over that summer, how that poster sort of spreads and gets out of control, and then what happens to Frankie later when she is revisiting this summer as an adult. So yeah, I really did enjoy this. A big part of that is that I did really like Frankie as a character, and I liked watching what the relationship was between her and Zeke, and I didn't love every single thing about this book, but I definitely felt enough connection to it that I gave it 5 stars. I would say that probably a week later, I haven't been thinking about this as much as I would like for like a book that I would consider like a favourite of all time. I wouldn't say this was that, but I would still probably just about give it the 5 stars. And if you like coming of age stories and sort of stories where sort of not a huge amount happens, but you're interested in the character development and you don't mind a little bit of sort of teenage angst and so on, I think you would really enjoy this. Yes, that was the final book for the Octofinals, and that means that I have submitted my rankings to the Booktube Prize. You'll be seeing this video after the announcement of the results of the Octofinals. My actual main decision came down to what was going to be in position 4 and position 5, and that surprised me because like both the books that were fighting over those positions are actually pretty good books looking back on it. Obviously, I think it will come as no surprise to anybody that when I submitted my rankings, I submitted Glory in last place. Didn't enjoy that book at all. I would say that there was like a couple of moments I thought were really, really well done, and that was it in an entire 400-page book. I really, really struggled to read this, and had I had the opportunity to DNF it again, I would have done. So that came rock bottom. And my decision between position 4 and position 5 was between All This Could Be Different by Sarah Thankam Mathews and Carrie Soto Is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I ended up actually putting this in 5th position, and that was because although I think that some more difficult, more interesting issues were dealt with in All This Could Be Different than in the Taylor Jenkins Reid book, I do think that I actually gained slightly more enjoyment from reading Carrie Soto Is Back. So my main problem with this was I didn't really like the main character very much. This wasn't a book for me, and I was quite bored reading parts of it. So with the Taylor Jenkins Reid, which I've rated in 4th, Carrie Soto Is Back, again there were parts of this where I was really bored, and that was because there was so much about tennis in this, and had I been a fan of tennis, I think that this would have been a great book. I'm not a fan of tennis, so it wasn't a great book for me, but I did enjoy the ending a lot more than I enjoyed the ending of All This Could Be Different, so that's very slightly edged it into 4th position. In 3rd, into the books I liked the most, and the 3 books that I would put through if it was down to me, I have put through Bliss Montage by Ling in 3rd place. This one was tricky to place because I found it really, really hard to rank short stories up against a novel, but I actually enjoyed reading all of this book. There was no point where I was bored. The short stories in this are really, really weird, but I liked them, and there were some that I didn't get, but all of them I had a good time reading, so this was 3rd place. In 2nd place, as I've just mentioned, is Now Is Not the Time to Panic by Kevin Wilson. I thought that this was a really enjoyable book. I enjoyed it from start to finish, and therefore I've given this 2nd place. So in my first spot was Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin, and this was top spot for me because so many emotions. It really, really hit me hard. I was sobbing in more than one place in this book, and I thought it was a really great book that I would definitely read again, even though it broke me. That would be my ranking from Glory in last to 1st place, definitely a 5-star, Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. And that is the end of my Booktube Prize Octofinals video for this year. So hopefully I've given you a good idea of what to expect from all of these 6 books if you plan to read them. I can't wait to see what has gone through from my group. I think if I was predicting what will happen with this group, I definitely expect to see Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow going through, but I honestly couldn't tell you what will go through with it. Obviously, these are all my subjective opinions. Thanks for watching. Please do give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and consider subscribing if you haven't already. And I will hope to see you very soon for another video all about books here on Alice and the Giant Bookshelf. Bye for now.